It was another level of insanity. All right, we're back. We are COMP1006, Intro to Web Programming in the Winter 2017 semester at Georgian. And we're week 5, part 1 of our broadcast. That'll be okay. You know what? We talked about last week about a couple things. One of them was how to connect to Microsoft Azure and Heroku for using our PHP site. And I'll tell you that I have a solution for Azure. Worked it out. There's a way of doing it. It's actually very nice. It works out okay. You do need to have MySQL, you know, that little event manager system that we were using before, MySQL. Yes, Workbench. Thank you. It's escaping my head. MySQL Workbench. If you have that installed in your system, you're okay, right? And it doesn't use PHPMyAdmin, which is kind of unfortunate, but it does allow you in. Sorry?
You can link it to PHPMyAdmin.
You can do that too, but I want to show you how to do it without, right? With the regular way of doing it. And so that way, when you, can I get you to close the door? There you go. Guys, when you come in, if you come in late, close the door, please, because lots of traffic outside. Yes, you can link it, there's ways, but for now, it's the most important thing is, can I access a database? Can I create a database on the cloud, which is where it's going to be? Because if you create a database locally, can I access it? No, right? Which will cause errors. And I don't want you to send me your SQL files. That's not going to do, all right? So I can set it up locally with me. It's going to kill me, right? So it's got to be remote. That's what it's got to be, right? So if it's got to be remote, then we're going to do it the proper way. All right, so let's set this up. First of all, I have an old project from last week, lesson 4. I want to make another one, right? So I'm going to kind of copy this one in Windows and paste it, which is going to cause a copy to happen, right? 930 items already, right? Rename this thing to lesson 5. There we go, lesson 5. And we got another problem when I rename it to lesson 5, and it's taking its sweet time in my virtual machine. I have a Git repository I need to get rid of, right? And it's buried in here. And also, I have a idea folder. I want to get rid of that too. And the reason why I want to get rid of both the idea folder and the GitHub folder, and this is taking its sweet time for whatever reason, is because both of those folders, the .idea and .git, hold information about the project that I do not want to duplicate, okay? And one day when this craziness happens, I don't know why this is doing this, but sometimes virtual machines do what they're going to do. Sometimes Windows machines do what they're going to do. For now, while we're waiting, instead of waiting, I've set up, if I go to portal.azure.com, last week I was successfully able to set up another database, and it is actually a separate MySQL database, separate. So it's not built into a project. And I found that this was the most efficient way, the easiest way to make it work. And it works both. I can use one database to work both for Heroku and for Microsoft Azure websites. That's the reason why you want to do it, right? Of course, you can go the other way around as well, which is it's both possible. Yay, finally resolved. With using JAWSDB like I showed you guys last week. But I'd rather use ClearDB on Azure if I can. That's my preference. Any database that works for you, though, is sufficient for me. Okay, you don't have to use one database over the other. As long as it's a MySQL database, MySQL, host it anywhere. And as long as you can access it and I can go to your site and access that database, I'm good to go. I don't care about it. I don't care where it is. As long as it's not local on your system somehow or inside your basement. You know, that would be very bad. All right, so I've got this project, lesson 5. I got .git and .idea and .vs Code. I need to get rid of .git here in Windows. And I want to get rid of .idea because it's a project that has project information. I want to get rid of it, right? I want to keep my basic structure, though, lesson 5. And then I want to kick off a new project with PHP Storm based on an existing project file. So I'm going to click on this one. Create new project, and I'm not going to click this one. I want to click this one for now, right? Just to give you another project opportunity. And Oh yeah, I love when this happens. When when the size of my screen, unfortunately here, is so big. Right, you like this? Now if I press enter, it takes me to the next area anyway, but that's kind of sucky, right? What I want to do is I want to point to where in here, if I go to users, and if I go to me, and if I go to where it is right now, which is my project up on the desktop, there is a project folder 1006, and I'm going to go into lesson 5, which I just created, this one, right, and click on project root. This will set this project as the project root and create that .idea folder. Yay. Okay, that's what I'm doing here. Okay, if I press next, I can't press next, right? And I can't do this, look. Hello. I can hide the path, but I despise when this thing happens. When this happens, notice there's some buttons on the bottom, and I cannot do anything about it, right? The only thing I can do is modify my screen size, which just sucks. I hate that.
If you drag it to the top, will it fit into the window?
Sure. Yeah.
Or can't you just press Alt or?
Yeah, there's always things to do, but you know, the challenge with virtualized environments was that. No, I'm not. I blame my virtual my environment's really big, right? So bear with me as I do this. Again, you can always do this. I'm just going to change my display settings, right, where I can kind of, instead of going 100%, and of course I can't. Let's try that again. That was a weird click. No, it's because I'm displaying things on the thing here, on the projector. See, I can't even change this. Some apps won't respond, but I can do this. So, and this is just temporary, so it's bad. But I'm going to go down to 1024 by 768 and apply, and I'll keep these changes for a second, right? And let's see if this will handle it differently or if it makes it worse. Probably make it worse. Let's take a look. Made it worse. Yeah, that's worse. Let's go back, right? Maybe go up a step. How about that? So maybe we go up to here. Like, yeah, I can do it. All right.
Okay.
Keep changes and then I'll revert back later. We'll find another solution. Yeah, I hate doing this stuff with Windows. We'll keep this up for a second. I want to finish so I can create that project structure. And then what I want to do is go back and change it back to something that's more realistic, right? 1600 by 1200 or something like that. That's more realistic. All right. So now we've got our project files on the left, right? We have our project files on the left, and we have our index.php. Notice it created lesson 5. We have some stuff to modify. We have to change our bower.json file, right? So that's one thing we have to change. Here it is on the right-hand side. Notice it says lesson 3. We're at lesson 5. Let's make sure all these changes are in effect, right? So I'm just going to do one of these, and I'll set up lesson 5 in a second, right? PHP with MySQL is what we're talking about. Leave all the rest of this alone and save. And that's one area. The other one is on our index.php page. Make sure that the index.php page itself has no reference to the, to the lesson, because I don't want that to happen. And I'm going to later on, I'm going to have a README file, which I don't have yet, but I will have a README file, which will set up on GitHub. Okay, so I've got everything set up to start with. I'm ready to go now. I want to put things up on GitHub. Question for you, for PHP Storm lovers, right? Can I set up my Git repository straight from PHP Storm? If I go to VCS, right, and I want to set up my version control, how do I do it for those people who are doing it? Is it enable version control integration? Huh? Tell me how you do it. Okay, we could do that, but is there a way of doing it without any kind of command line at all? Anybody have a solution? What was that? Okay. It says select the version control system. I'm going to choose Git and press OK. And when I do that, create a Git repository. So that's your Git init. console whatsoever, right? Next. All right, now what we got to do is commit changes, right? What kind of changes do we have? No changes detected. Oh man, what the hell happened? Or what did it do when I did git commit? And I want to talk about this because Git integration is great, but I also want to understand what it's doing. So if I just go to the project, and again, it's under desktop, under COMP1006, so let's navigate there. And if I look at the project, it's COMP1006, lesson 5, and I'll clear the screen. And if I do a git log, fatal, your current branch master does not have any commits yet. That's a thing, right? How do I add everything? How do I select everything in my version control system to everything else, right? So if you notice I have git, I'm going to click on add. It's asking me, what do I want to add? It says, do you want to add the following file to git? Yeah, sure. That's just an XML file that kind of tells me what it is. That's one, but that's not what I wanted. So let me see what it did now. And this is the way to understand what it's doing. So if I get git log, nothing. You do a darn thing, right? All right. Let's go to VCS, git, right? And if I go to look at the other ones that I have here, merge changes, unstash, reset head, all this kind of stuff. If I go to add again, it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't give me a selection of things to add. That's what I'm expecting it for it to do, right? So this is where I have a problem with integrated tool sets, unless they really spell it out. It's hidden what I can do, but what I really want to do is kind of git add dot. That's the first thing I want to do. That's why I like command line, so much cleaner. Git commit -m initial commit. Once you reset this up, and I recommend this for PHP Storm or any other thing, right? And if I do clear, I have that piece. Now if I go back up here to VCS, and I want to add a remote, right? So git, you can see there's branches and remotes. Here's my remote. That is okay. I can set that up. I can set up a remote. And of course, I'm going to set up a remote called master or origin. And there's my origin remote. I don't have that yet. And I want to create it. So I'm going to go up to GitHub really quickly. And all I need to do here when I go to the repository for Georgian, right? I want to create a new repository up here called COMP1006 W2017, and it's lesson 5, right? I have a remote. I have the link. That's all I need right here. So I'll copy this one, go back to PHP Storm, put it in, and press OK. Now I got the remote. I haven't pushed anything to the remote, but as soon as I have the remote, that's like doing git remote add origin, and then in quotations, the path to the remote. That's what I've just done. Okay. Next is pushing to the remote. So git VCS, and I want to do push. Right now, there is a shortcut key, Control-Shift-K, which actually pushes to my remote, right? So this is it, push. It's going to say, which one is it? It's this one, right? And it also shows me all this stuff, right? That's going to be pushed, 8 files. If I want to, I can push tags. I don't have any tags, but I'm going to click push. And if everything goes well on the bottom, I'm going to get no error, and it'll push everything nicely to the remote. Now, I've had some real issues today. I don't know what's going on with Git, but Alex and I, we noticed that earlier today, there was a bit of, because it was in my other class, there's a bit of lag. So today, we might have that lag. When we push to Git, sometimes it takes a second for it to actually come up, right? It's something was happening today. I don't know what's going on today, if there's doing some kind of maintenance or if something's going on the some kind of pathing or whatever on the web, but there is a bit of a delay on GitHub. So bear with me when we do that. We figured that out today. Well, let's check and see if it went out finally. So refresh, should be there. Yeah, we got our first commit. There it is, right? And first commit includes all these files. Let's take a look at what the files we've included, and I'll make this a little larger so you can see this one because of our weird resolution right now, which we'll adjust another time. All right, so there it is. We got idea that got created from PHP Storm. We've got our content and everything else, and our connection. Notice that I have a connection string. I'm going to pull this up for you guys to see that. this connection string is the connection string from my new repository or my new connection or my new MySQL server up on Azure. I'm going to use this one, but we're going to make a new one, okay, so that I can show you how that whole process works. Let's go back to Azure for a second. And if I go back, by the way, everything gets reset back to the size, right? So I don't have to worry about all that stuff. It happens because it's in a virtualized environment, and it's going to readjust the size based on my viewport and what I'm displaying. Notice it takes up the whole screen now. We're good to go. Let's go back. So here, what I'm talking about is I have one called Video Games DB. And instead of me creating it from scratch, I'm going to show you some things. If I click on this after I've created it, under properties, this is the great thing about it. It gives me usernames and passwords. I'm not going to show them down here. I want you to see them because I'll get in trouble for showing them, not because I don't want you to have them. You have them, actually. They're up on GitHub, right? But if you scroll down here, it doesn't just have the host name. It has the host name, the port, the username, the password. Everything is here. And it's auto-generated. It's not something that you can create on your own. One thing I had to do when I created this stuff is I had to create a database name. That's not an option. You can't create more than one database with your free version of MySQL. You cannot. So my database name that I called it Video Games DB. That's the database name right here. And I did that by using, again, I created my ClearDB. How does this work? Let me show you how it works. I'm not going to step through all of it because the process is long. We don't have a long time today. Not because I can't do it or I want to show you or there was tricks around it. There's no tricks. Okay, this is how it works. Plus, right? And instead of me searching through or going through storage or whatever, I'm just going to search for MySQL. So MySQL or whatever you want to call it. If I press enter, it's going to give you some options. One of the options is MySQL or MySQL by ClearDB. This is the one you want to choose, not the one that's combined with web app plus MySQL. That has some weird. But if you do this one, this is independent. MySQL database is independent of all the websites. So this is the one I want to choose. Notice it says create, right? I want to create my database. Now it's going to ask me to create one in DreamSpark. I already have one. I can only create but one, right? But here what you're going to put in is the original database name. This is how you do it. And you have to choose a resource group just like we normally did before. So you choose a resource group. If I use an existing resource group, as an example, I might choose Canada East or Canada Central, right? Here's my location, Canada Central. You can also choose any other location you want, right? The pricing tier Mercury means free. We'll leave it as such, right? Review legal terms. I may want to agree to my legal terms. You have to agree, right, when the legal information comes up one day. There we are. And it says the total bill is 0. That's what it should say. If it says your total bill is $15 a month, something's wrong. You've chosen a different pricing tier, or you're not using DreamSpark or Imagine. You're using pay-as-you-go. If you use pay-as-you-go, and if you choose another pricing tier, you will be charged $15 a month, and it'll be relentless. Like, they're going to get their money, right? So that means you put your credit card in somehow. I'm going to click purchase, right? So this is accepted, and then I got to create a unique name, and the unique name is just like we make with websites. Once I've done that and click create, then it's going to take you back to what we did over here, which is this, and that's all I did. There's nothing else I did there. In my properties, then it's going to have all the username and email information that you need. And back in PHP Storm, this is the information that I sub in here. Okay? Make sense? So all that work that we did last week, and it didn't work, it was because of integration. This way, the separate database, and both Heroku and Azure can tap into this no problem. Okay? And that's my recommendation if you have Azure Access. If you don't have Azure Access, you're going to have to use some other database that's on Heroku, and I showed you that last week. Okay, so please see the video from the end of last week. That's week 4. Yeah, you got to close that door, eh? Week 4, and that's part 3, I believe, of week 4. Last week, we did it in the afternoon. Remember when you were with me last week? I kind of recorded that part of how to connect to JAWS DB is what I did, right? So if you can't use Azure, please use a database through Heroku. All right, well, one thing we did last week was do this. We did this kind of PHP. We connected to it. And then down in here, we have this for each loop. And as we loop through each game in games, this is how the for each loop works. we're going to create a list item that shows the game ID, the game name, and the game cost. And that's how we've read the database. Now, in order for us to read the database, we did a couple of things. We used a query that would select all from games. So we read everything, right? This is a kind of a crappy way to read everything, though. And there's a better way to do this, right? A better way to select and kind of create this, this thing here, right? And this structure. I'd like to use a table. And tables work fantastic when it comes to tableized data, right? Some kind of list is okay if I was going to use it in a list, but I want to make for your assignment number 1, it should be in a table, a tabular kind of format, right? Instead of me recreating a wheel, I'm going to use Bootstrap, right? Which I recommend, but you don't have to. If you're someone who doesn't like Bootstrap, or you like to use your own CSS, you're perfectly able to do so. I'm not going to stop you. I recommend Bootstrap. I think it's a fast way of getting things going and templating, but it's definitely not something that you need to use, right? I'm going to go to components for a second, and under components for Bootstrap on the right-hand side, there's a bunch of different things here, in terms of labels and nav bars and everything else that we've talked about before. And as I skip down, you can see there's a bunch of stuff. One thing that's missing from our list right here, if I scroll down, is tables, and you can find that under CSS. If you go all the way to the top, click CSS. Under Bootstrap on the right-hand side, you can see tables, and it gives you some good examples of how to make a table, right? It even gives you the code. So table, class table, and then that's the table for the outside. And if you really want to, it gives you all the table information for the inside. And if you scroll down enough, you'll find those examples. So TR, again, just to recount here, is the table row, right? And you can decide whether the table row is different, that has different highlights if you want to. We can make responsive tables, and they talked about cells and how to do that. Further down, but really at the end of the day, any kind of table structure is what we need to get going. Now, great thing is, even if they don't show it here, what could I do? I can look at my view source as an example to see if I want to do this kind of table. So here's an example of striped rows, which I like. I like this kind of look and feel to my table. I could make a table straight from this, but why if I can just do view source? I'm going to go view page source, right? And it's massive, right? But the great thing is, if I want to see striped tables, right? If I want to see that, you can see that there's a lot of examples here of different code, and I can get right to it by Control F. If I go striped, right? Table striped. And it's kind of hard to read, but they have all the code here that you need. So here is the table head, right? With the table row, with the table header. And what they do is they can put the table header in first. If you're not familiar how to make tables, they have examples in here if you really want to go in and dive into that. That's one way of doing it. Let's go back. The other way is, if you don't remember how to do tables and if you're not good at it, you can always go to W3 Schools, right? Somehow, though, you've got to remember how to do tables. And if I was going to research for an essay, HTML table, I search for that. Here we go. Here's tables, and it shows you what to do. And they give you the code, right? So this is the other way to do it. Table with now we're not going to put inline styling like that. We're going to use Bootstrap. So let's just take this default table style. Now, one thing they're missing is a table header. So I want to find one that has a table header built in. Not CSS, but actually the table header itself. Let's see if there's a good example of that. Table row. So I'm really lazy, and here it is. So here's the table header. So table header for this table row with the table header of name. And then, here we go. What's TD stand for? Come on. You guys don't know? God. Name Bill Gates. That's the actual column itself. The table data is Bill Gates, TD, right? TR is table row, TH is table header, right? So if I want to make a bunch of table headers, right? I want to have header, header, header. How do I do that? Well, I'll give you some examples of how they can do that. There's the caption you want. And then again, you have a bunch of table headers at the top within the first row, and then everything else will have table data. And we're going to have our own table data be injected by PHP, right? That's how it's going to work. All right, so this is what we want, more or less. I'm just going to take this, copy it, copy it, right, as an example, and go back to PHP Storm. And I'm going to leave this alone for now and kind of go in there and paste it. There's our table. We're going to get rid of the style, right? And we're going to get rid of this caption for a second. Well, we could leave it as our games list, right? Games list. We could do that. We'll see the difference, what comes up. And we could put in the name of our table headers right here. We could put something like this. We could say our name. We want that. Maybe we also have an ID. Just want to show the ID for now. I'm going to copy. So here's our ID, our name. And right now, all we care about is cost. We can put a bunch of other ones, but these are the ones that we want. For the table row in here, right, here's our table row. I only want one of them, right? So one of them that has actual table data, right, in the table row. And I want to kind of supplant what it's going to look like on a kind of standard day. Now, I don't want to iterate. I don't want to do this PHP loop for the entire table, because that's going to create a lot of three different tables. I don't want three different tables. I want one table with a bunch of table data in rows, right? So this idea is right, but instead of doing a for each loop with this, I want to use table data to do that, right? So I'm going to copy this for now. I'm leaving this alone, and there's a reason for this. And inside my table row, I'm going to kind of go in there and paste. There's my for each. But instead of a list item, I don't want a list item, because that only works for lists. I want a table data, and I want to close off with table data. It finds that out, right? So, and then what I want to do is I want to add in my game ID, right, for my first piece of table data, right? So this is this part, and I like this idea, but I'm not going to put it all on one row. So I'm going to copy this one, and it's going to say my game is going to be here. So my table data plus the game ID plus this is the first row, okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kill all this. Bear with me, name and cost, right? Then I'm going to echo the next one. So copy. So each iteration of my loop, I'm going to have several pieces of table data. So this is my name, and here's my cost. We're just breaking it out a little differently this time. That's all. Same idea that I did up here with this. Instead of one line being a list item, I don't need this anymore, right? I want my table to be created. Oops. I want my table to be created, and I want Bootstrap styling for the table. Right now, I've just got basic table layout, and I don't care about this because this is just dummy data, right? So I've got three pieces of data, and I've got three columns with a header row, right? Nice and simple. Let's go back to Bootstrap now that we got that. All right, cool. So I want to add this class table striped. I want to add that class, copy it, and go back to PHP Storm, and put that at the top of my table. So now I've got styling for my table by default, using Bootstrap style, right? I can put other ones in there, two other classes like table-hover, right? So when you hover over, it changes. I can put also, I think it's table-bordered, right? I like that. And you can have as many different classes in there as you want to create your own look and feel of the table. All right? Okay, what does this do? How can I test this thing out? Well, one thing I know is this. Down below, I still have got my WAMP server. So I could always repoint my remote. Oops, my remote, which is this. This is pointing to my remote online, right? I can point it local if I want to. I don't want to right now. If I click this little button here, Alt F2 as well, it'll launch Chrome. And if I did everything correctly, I will be able to see my data in this kind of format. Not exactly what I was looking for. How come? Part of it came up okay, but then I got the other part that was kind of outside of my rows. Yeah. They're all in the same row, right? I need to make them, well, they're all in the same. I want them to put them on different rows, right? So nice idea. We're almost there, right? And this isn't quite large enough. Like this is pretty small for this size, right? I want to make it so that everything fits. And why isn't it fitting? I got to think about this too. Well, there is a reason for that. It's because of the outside, right? So what I've done is I said, my class of my row, column medium offset 3 with a column medium of 6. Maybe I need more than 6. Maybe I need 8. And I need 2. That's part of it, right? Here I can't do this. This I can do, the first part. But this is incorrect. Each of the rows, right, for my loop have to be different. It's almost like I got to create 3 rows. One row one row for each of these things, right? Well, maybe not. What else can I do? Well, this is wrong, right? This has got to be inside here. I got to make a table row every single time. So inside of the top of my loop, not just table data in the same row, but a different row for each table, for each data, right? So I'm gonna go one of these. I go tr, right? And the bottom, all set up. Once we've set this up the first time, we're gonna be golden. Okay, there we go. And at the side, we're gonna put that in there. And then we're just gonna get rid of these because we don't want this. Nice idea, but that's not what we wanted. Save, and if I go back to here and refresh, and we should see it in the right format. Yeah. Few names we kind of decided, and it's displayed in a nicer way. Now remember, I want other things in here. I want the ability for us to have edit buttons, delete buttons, all this kind of stuff in here that I asked you guys to put in. So how can I inject buttons that have some kind of effect? When I click on the button, something's going to happen. Right? That's what I really want, right? So the button itself has to be response. It has to be a response to some kind of event, right? But I need to put the buttons in place first. So let's say there's no functionality for the buttons at the beginning. Each of my rows, every time I iterate, is going to have a button that says edit, and there's going to have a button that says delete. I should be able to do that kind of in my row. Let's just say. So I should be able to delete my data as I go. How do I set that up, right? And games list, this caption was neat, but it was really small. I want to get my games list up there. I don't even have any kind of functionality, no navigation. For now, I don't care, right? But you may want to care later on, and we'll get to that. So let's go back. Oops. Let's go back, and let's kill this caption, right? And we'll change our H1 tag, right? That's inside of our tables. And by the way, let's go back to 6 and 3 for a second to show you the difference. So PHP MySQL would be changed to games list, right? Go back and refresh. You can see the effect immediately on the table, a little bit shorter, right? What I want is a couple of more headers, right? One for edit, the edit row, and one for the delete. So I can put that in. So I'll go back in here. But instead of actually naming them, edit and delete, I'll just put empty table headers. So I'll say table header, right, and table header. Okay, so it's the two empty kind of rows or columns, right? And inside here, right, what I want to do is for each loop, I want to set up a button, right? That's within each row. So I want to kind of go in here and set up a button. So I'm going to go echo. Now for now, all I want to set up is the ability for me to put this button in place. So it's going to be button, and then button. Right, so that's the button. That's the first button. And this is going to be the edit button, right? And it's going to have a class of, you got to be very careful here, right? Button, and then button for the edit, primary. That's the Bootstrap class, which makes it blue, right? So it kind of highlights the button. I want to kind of take this button here without doing anything right now. By the way, maybe what I want to do is put an ID. Oops. I need to be able to click on this thing and have an ID of my edit button later on. But for now, let's just copy it and make another one. So this is delete. And I want to have a button danger. Right? So there's my danger button and my edit button. If I want to, I can also incorporate, say, I think I added in, if I go back to the top, Font Awesome, yeah? Did I add in Font Awesome?
I think you did.
So then if I did, I should be able to go in here on the bottom and start typing in some Font Awesome code. So it looks like this, I tag, right? And inside my I tag, I can put in a class of FA, and I want to put a kind of some kind of edit, right? There's no edit, but if you don't know what Font Awesome is, by the way, we've only talked about it very briefly in this class, but you may have seen it already. It's an actual font, an icon font framework where you can go to icons, they're trying to sell it. And if I look at edit, You can see an idea of what it looks like. Pencil Square O, kind of a default font, or pencil itself, whatever you want. I think I want to use this one. If you click on it, it actually gives you the code for it. So here's pencil, FA, pencil square O. So I'm going to copy that one and go back to PHP Storm and put that in there. That's the pencil square. And it's going to be appearing inside the button, right? And I'll do the same thing.
Yeah, you do.
And you've got two closing content.
You like that? I like that, right? We're just giving you lots of challenge, right? Let's get that button again. I would have noticed it eventually. Oh, one thing I do need to do is make sure there's a space between the actual text of the button and the icon, or else it'll be abutted against each other, and that's not good. So copy this. So I don't want to copy this too much. And put that in over here, right? And again, we'll get back to this. The delete is a trash, right? That's what we want to find. So if we go back to here and look for something that's delete, so if I look at delete, you can see that there's trash O, which is probably the right thing to do. I can probably grab that as well. So FA trash, right? O, I'll just type it in. O means outline. That's it. So let's see what I get now if I save it. If I have Font Awesome ready, then I should see the buttons. If I don't, then I'll see some weird effect. That's kind of weird, right? Now, what happened here? How come it did this? Huh? Right, well, it's just effect. I mean, it was what I wanted, but I didn't get what I want. It's in a loop. That's fine. It's supposed to be in the same thing. Here's my TD, but this is the problem. I don't have a TD on either side, right? My data. I have to put something in there. I just can't put buttons. That's one thing. And where's the comma that you're saying? At the end. No, I don't see any problem with that. You see, oh, this, you mean? No, this wouldn't have worked if there was something missing there, right? So this is all okay, but the problem is that I don't have any of these. So I kind of have to incorporate these as well. So I'm going to kind of take one of these out. And now the great thing is, because I'm just doing all this, I'm not injecting anything right now. I could put this in at the beginning. I couldn't put something like TD, right? And I'll put this over here. This is like table data, right? I'm injecting inside the table data. I'm injecting this part, and then I'm finishing off the table data, TD, and over here. And if I'm correct, that's really bad. Thank you for that. You guys are wonderful. You guys are watching today. It's amazing. You guys noticed that I said assignment 2 instead of assignment 1? Fantastic stuff. I know, it's good. It's good. It's good. Refresh, right? And I'm good.
Oh, that's like
right? So now we have a button. Now these don't work. If I click on these, they don't mean anything yet. What I want to do, here's my thing. First of all, cost doesn't make any sense. I'm getting weird costs, right? This should be actually $22.99. We set something up like that, right? So how come we're not getting the cost, right? We have to figure that out. And also, how do I make these buttons work? And how come they're not centered in the cells? That's another thing we can do. We can try and think about centering them and the whole thing. That's all CSS, right? But for now, what I want to think about is when I click on the edit button, it's going to take me to the Counter-Strike page. There's no Counter-Strike page, but we'll have one, right? When I click the delete button, it's going to ask me if I really want to. I'm not sure, and then I'll just delete it. That's what I want, functionality-wise. The UI is very simple. To get hints on how to do this, right, I have a PowerPoint that I put up, right? So take a look at the PowerPoint and I want your help, right? Because I can do this on my own, but that's not the exercise, right? PowerPoint number 5 for lesson 5 is just code, right? So create, read, update, delete with PHP is what I called it, right? And if you look at it, they have an example of something called a product manager with a delete button, right? Which we want to incorporate, and pricing, right? And what they also have in here is an interesting thing. What they've done is they've taken away this database stuff, the database connection stuff. They've taken it away and they've put it in its own file. And they've used a special way of doing that by using a statement, the include statement is what is being used, right? What include does is it injects, it takes the entire piece that's in here. So let's say, for example, I wanted to include all my database.php. I would take this, read it, and inject it into the place where, on the server side itself, where I've included it. So down into my index.php, you can see that I'm requiring once. There's different kinds of requires. I can do a require, which means every time I go there, I want you to give me another one, even if I have 10 of them. That might be useful if I want to require some kind of component over and over again. We can use that for templating. For example, these rows and columns. I can create a template, and I can require every time I iterate that row and column a bunch of times, right? When I use require once, it only allows me to go and grab that one time, right? And that would be really good for database.php. And that's all my connection string stuff, right? I don't want to do that more than once. It'll cause an error in the database. It's like I'm creating two connections to the database. That is illegal, right? We don't want that to happen. So this is where we use require once. Now, the other great reason for using require is when we want to inject page data that I want to use from one page to the other. Can you think of anything that I want to reuse from one page to the other? Anybody? Huh? Global UI. How about navigation, right? That's, yeah, all that stuff is, I don't want to always write it in every one of my pages. And so far to date, you haven't been shown, if I'm not wrong, how to do it without writing it on every page. Every page has an ad bar, right? That is inefficient, right? You'll learn how to do this with PHP. You'll learn how to do it with ASP.NET. You'll learn how to do it with Node.js. Every system, every solution stack, PHP being the part of the AMP stack, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, has the ability for you to use partial files, right? And we can store partial files in different positions and then load them in by using the require statement. So here we're using require once, and that's what I want to do in my code. And I want to break off this database.php piece, this piece, and create its own PHP file. There's no HTML here whatsoever. This is our first pure PHP code that we're writing, right? And this is okay. This is good. So I'm going to go back to here. Again, I'm trying to help you for your assignment if you're not noticing, right? So if you haven't noticed yet, you should really notice. I'm trying to help you, right? I'm trying to help you because it's easy for me to say, go ahead, do your assignment. Here's the PowerPoint. See you later, right? But that's not my role. My role is to kind of bridge the gap, catalyze, if you will, some of the learning to make it faster, right? Because you can read your own, your book on your own and do tutorials and all that stuff. That's my job. I'm trying to make it fast for you. So the way we do it is, I have my index.php here. Notice at the top of my code, I have all my connection strings. Here it is right here, right? And I have this TryCatch that does things like checks to see if I have an error. So all this stuff, my connection string all the way down to here, I want to choose this as my database.php file that I'm going to put in a separate place. So let's do that. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go new PHP file, right? And we're going to call this database.php, right? It says, hey, do you want to add the following file to Git? Database.php. Yes, of course I do, or else it's not going to be tracked. Yay, we've added a new database PHP file. Notice that there's only the opening PHP tag, but not the closing. How come? How come there's no closing tag here? Shouldn't we have a closing tag? Technically, I like that answer. Technically, you don't need one for PHP as long as inside of its own file, there's no other PHP usage. So if I go PHP and then I want to kind of inject PHP down on my page, I need to close my tag. However, good practice shows you should close it anyway. And that's my recommendation. Please don't leave open tags with not a closing tag. It's good practice, and it gets you to see, kind of from a debugging perspective, it saves it'll save you errors and headaches. Just go in here like this for a second while I type. Oh yeah. All right, so what I want to do then is like what I said. I want to kind of go in here inside my index.php, grab all this stuff, so Control X, it's all gone. And I want to go back into my database.php, right, and replace all this stuff, Control V, right, and it's in there, right? Oh man, what did I miss? My PHP tag, that's what I missed, right? So I'm going to put them in here. So I'm going to go up to the top and put them in myself. So I'll say PHP, right? And at the bottom, I want to close these off. So, is that good? Well, that suffice. And this is my database.php. So save it. I've saved my database.php. And now I want to include it, but I only want to include it once. And I want to include it where I took it from, in my index.php. So here in my index.php, remember, we're going to call every file, we're ending it off in our database with our solution stack. Every file, regardless if you're using PHP or not, should have a PHP ending. It makes it for a much better server experience, right? All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to say include, and notice it gives me some code ending, include once, right? And then we need to know what we're including. And what is it called? Database.php. As I type, it comes up with some code hinting. And I can put that in. So there, inside line 2, is where everything from PHP, database.php will be injected. Now, we have an issue here. Look, it says here, there's a problem. It says redundant closing tag. Leave that redundant closing tag alone, okay? Please, don't change it. Leave it there. It's not going to hurt anybody. And for older versions of PHP, if you're ever going to do backwards compatibility, at times it can be required. And even for future versions, it can be required. Leave it alone. It's not going to hurt you, right? Okay, testing. I need to test this now. So let's go back to here and see if it's going to work, right? So I'm going to go back to my page and refresh. And, oh, man, what the hell? Oh, good. It worked, right?
Did you not still have the database connected in your index?
I did. I'm raising my eyebrow because something happened, right? Let's take a look. Let's go do an inspect, right? Here's my console. I'm pretty good. I got no errors from that perspective. And I can see my data, which is a good sign, okay? My data is not perfect by any means, right? But it's not bad. If I hover over it, I get that hover effect. That comes from Bootstrap. All the CSS that I'm getting, the CSS effects from my table, Bootstrap, everything Bootstrap. All right, it says, Bootstrap min.css.map requested without authorization. You can copy URL, authorization to clipboard, sure. And it's a weird little thing that it's doing, and I'm fine with that. The other thing that it does here, if you notice in the PowerPoint, so this is one, database.php. It also has something called error, database.error, right? And it does things a little differently. It says, well, TryCatch, if you can open it, great. If not, show the message. But then it includes something called a database error.php file. And what they recommend is something that looks like a real error, right? Nothing's wrong with putting in something like this, right? Which basically has its own page just for errors, where it says there was an error connected to the database. Database must be installed as described in Appendix A, la, 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 la. I'm not going to put that in. Let's leave it out. I'm not going to put in this database error stuff. If you want to, though, you could do the same thing. Notice here where I'm including it, but did you also notice that I didn't include it once? I'm including it as many times as there's an error. It's going to come up like that, which makes sense, right? I want to include that page. It's a template, and I'm going to kind of put out that page every single time. Why? Because I could probably only put it once. Because once I do that, I'm exiting from this whole thing. I'm using the exit, which is exiting from my entire application. All right, so that's one. Then they talk about creating the index.h or that PHP. And here is where we do some of this connection. We require once. They do some filtering. And then we do our selection statement, select star from categories, where category ID is equal to category ID. And we do a bind value, where category ID is equal to the category ID that I take into the database, right? So category ID $ is the variable, right? Here, what I'm doing is I'm saying if category ID is set, I'm kind of checking to see if the category ID is set, and if it is, then what we want to do is get the category ID from the actual file itself, and if we can, great. If not, then we'll just pick the first category. Me personally, what I'm going to do is a little differently. Bind value, we're going to use this later on, is when we have a form and we want PHP to process something, and we want to bind the actual fields in the form in here in our selection statement, right? When we try and do something, we try and insert or delete or whatever we're going to do. Right now, it's not required. One thing that they do is they're only going to fetch one, When I just use fetch, the difference between fetch and fetch all is fetch only fetches one or loads one row from the database. Fetch all fetches everything, which is what we want in our list, right? We want to fetch everything. Close cursor shuts down the connection, right? So this is the first part. And again, then we can do, if you notice, as it continues, we're going to select star from categories and order by the category ID. And we're going to do another query. Here's statement 2. And we're going to, again, open a file, kind of connection to the database, fetch everything, and close the cursor again. So statement 2 will have a list of all of the products, right? And here's statement 3. They do a bunch of them. Statement 1, statement 2, statement 3. You can query the database as many times as you want. And statements, each of these statements is going to hold information, right, for each of these polls from the database, right? Now, 3 statements to me is a lot. I don't understand why they do that, but that's the first thing that they're doing. Inside the body of our document, you can see something similar to what we're doing. We're saying, well, our href is, now here's something that's interesting. So question mark, category ID, right, we're using the PHP echo here, right? And PHP echo is saying, hey, inject the category ID in here into this. What's this? Category underscore ID. Anyone have an idea what this is? What's an href? So question mark, href, and then this. What does that do? Anybody? Yeah. Yeah, what it's actually doing is we're building up our link. Href is the link, right, which is what we want to do with the button, right? The button, right? Right now I've used button, but maybe button's the wrong thing that I want to use. Maybe what I want to use is and you can do this as well, an input with a style of a type of button, which is better, with an anchor tag. And that's a different form altogether of a type of button, right? And the anchor tag itself will have an href, right? And the href, which is a link, is going to point us to that page. It's going to push over the ID that we want to look at that I want to delete. I'm going to take that ID when I do a post, and I'm going to send it for processing in another page. But it's going to be sent inside the URL, whatever that ID is. So I want to capture that button, that game ID, right? That's what I want to capture. And I want to send it inside of my form. So that's one thing. Notice that I don't have a form yet. All I have is an href for this link, right? I do have a for each. I can kind of go through the for each loop and notice that it says end for each. I got a for each here and an end for each, right? Did I do that here? Right, take a look. So here's my index.php. Stop me, please, if you don't understand something. This will come back to bite you in spades if you don't understand this later, right? So here's my for loop, and I don't got no for each and for each. How come I can do this?
It's alternative syntax.
It is. And why is it alternative syntax? Why do I care? Why would I rather do it this way or the other way? Is there a reason for it?
Well, when it's mixed in with your HTML and everything.
It saves problems. It actually, what it does for us is it solves problems to have that alternative syntax. It's like putting a curly brace at the end. That's what that end for each is, right? So we use that all the time for that kind of thing, right? So this is okay. I like it. But like I said, maybe what we want here is instead of a button with a class of button and an I tag, this maybe not cut it. I want an href. I want to be able to, when I click the button, send some information onto my page, right? And if that's the case, right? If that's the case, don't I want to surround my table with a form? Because if I surround my table with a form, I can have a form action. And the form action will actually physically take me to another page if I want to, or send it for processing somewhere else, right? There's two different kind of form actions in HTML. What are they? Basics. Post and get, right? So whatever I get, whatever I send from my form, and I got to be very careful about this, whatever I'm sending from my form out is going to be captured. I can capture data. I can send data if I want to. This case, I don't really care about sending data. All I care about sending is the ID of the buttons that I want to edit or delete. Which one do I want to edit or delete? The ID of the game that I want to edit or delete. All right, so that's the first thing I want. So I need to change this up. Let me just make some more room. And again, if you notice, what I've been trying to do here is make room by hiding. And how do I show in PHP Storm? Because I know we're all learning PHP Storm now. You can see that I can click on project. Clicking on project over and opens and closes it, the project explorer stuff. I don't want to keep it open unless I have to, because I need the maximum room for you guys, right? So how is it going to look a little different? It's going to look like this. Echo, again, I'm going to open up my, my single tick right here. I definitely want to put in a TD, just like we have before, right? And inside my TD, I want to have a different set of structures, right? It's going to be different buttons. Now, to get a hint of that, if you don't remember, is if I go to my Bootstrap, again, if I look at buttons, you can see that there's different kinds of buttons. You can use a button like this, right, which is what we did. But really what we want to do is do a button like this, right, with an anchor tag. That gives us more control because of this href tag, right? Make sense? So I want to change my button class to an A. That's all I want to do right now. And change from, now notice my type is submit. I don't care what type it is. Submit is fine, right? But that's not what I care about. I care about my href tag. When I click on that, it's going to be a link that's going to transport me, whether I have a form or not. It's going to kind of put some stuff on my URL. It's going to try and take me somewhere. And it's going to try and take this thing for processing. Okay. And if I look at forms, here's a good example of forms where I have my buttons. Here's my button. Notice that my button has a type submit. This is going to capture data from the form in terms of inputs and so on, right? And then from there, transport all this to the form target, whatever that target is, with the type that I'm going to go kind of access. Here's inline forms. You can do something inline like this if I really wanted to, with name and email and so on. But the form we want to do is we want to surround everything with a form. So when we click the button, any one of those buttons will be like activating the form. All right, so I want to go back and change my button first. And I want to kind of go back to this button idea. And I want this kind of button, right? So the button's not going to change. My href will have to be involved. My role, I could put the role of button. This is just for an ARIA perspective, right? And the name of the link is going to be the same. There's nothing else really changing except for href is really what we need. Let's go back. Anyone have any other suggestions, by the way? Please speak up. So if I copy this whole thing, I'm just going to show you the difference. If I just copy this whole thing here, right? So this part, copy it, and go here and paste it, and change this from button to A, right? We almost have everything we need. Again, it'll have to put, the href will have to be inside here, right? Where href is equal to whatever we want, right? And this is where we can inject more PHP, right? Now there's a problem. I'm just putting it out there to you guys again. I have double quotes, and I have double quotes in here, and I want to inject stuff in here inside my href. Notice how they did it in the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint, here's my href, right? I have my PHP on the outside, right? With my category ID. I want to do all this kind of stuff, but it's going to be some tricky syntax, and it's going to look bug ugly. Just putting it out there, right? We're going to have to split this up into, you know, all kinds of ways. Can anyone recommend a nice way of doing it, right? Because you're going to have to do this for your own code right now. So first of all, let's change the other one. So this is the example that I use, so I can get rid of this, right? And let's test to see whether the button looks like a button. When it, well, of course it would, right? All we're adding is an href tag to give it a link. It's going to go somewhere, right? It's like just making a link look like a button with CSS. If I save it, and if I go back to the page, which is here, and if I refresh, no difference. Looks like a button. If I click onto it, it doesn't go anywhere right now because, but it is reacting if you notice, right? Before, the buttons didn't do a darn thing, right? So this is correct, what I want. But now what I want to show here is it's got to go somewhere, right? So where is it got to go? And what kind of, how can I put this in there? Is there something I can put in here that's going to transport me? Well, I know I have two things. If I want to edit or delete, right? My edit's got to go to an edit form. I don't have that form yet, but I will, right? So let's put that in there. Let's see if what happens if I put it in there. So I'm going to say something like this. I want to do for my edit, it's going to be my game details page, yeah? So I'm going to call it game details, game_details.php. I don't have that yet. And then quotation mark, right? And I want to kind of pass on the information that comes from my page, right? And I can inject the ID right in here, right? But that means if I inject it in here, because I've got my PHP opening tag up here, oh man, am I going to be in trouble? Do I have to do something that's different with the way I'm formatting this right now? Yeah. Can't do it like this. Right? Up to here, I can stop my loop, but I got to loop this whole time, right? So I'm going to have some issues here. Let's take a look and see what they did, right? So here they did a for each loop at the top where they ended off the for each loop here. And notice that there's a colon, right, at the end of the for each. That's the syntax we need to use. It's like using a curly brace, but without using a curly brace. And then we got to end off the for each down here. This is the thing we're doing. And then you can see that we can inject PHP the way we want in there, right? We can do that. But we're not doing it, we're not using echoes, but rather HTML tags inside the middle, okay? So instead of doing all this, we just revert back to HTML. But in here, the PHP tag will look something like this. So for each PHP, we'll change this to colon, right? And we'll end off the PHP tag right here. And wherever this PHP tag would end over here, right, we're going to put this back over here. And instead of using this closing brace, which would be nice to use, but we can't, right, is this end for each, right? So we're going to use this thing where we say PHP. And it'd be nice to do this, but we can't. End for each. Right, there it is. With, and thankfully, our PHP Storm helps us close it off. Great. Now we can get rid of all this stuff. So it really looks like, first of all, when I change stuff, notice what I'm doing. I'm changing things, one thing, I'm making one change at a time, right? So I make all these changes happen all at once, we're in deep trouble, right? So I don't do all that at once. And I recommend that same thing for you. Have a methodical way of doing things, right? So if I take all this stuff away, look at the work that I got to do here, right? So I got to do this. I got to inject my game ID here, which means I got to put some PHP in there. We're going to do this in a second. Bear with me. And I'll do the same thing here. I know it's like watching paint peel, my friends, but if we don't do this, if I don't show you this stuff here, and we have errors, I want to encounter some errors for you and some syntax problems, right? Then when it comes to you doing it on your own, you may have your own issues, and I'm not going to be around to solve them, right? So that's why I'm kind of trying to do it all at once right here. Okay, so I need to do something in the middle there where my names are, because those don't mean anything in this context right now. They mean nothing. They're just going to print out as text right now, right? So this is okay. At the end, I got to get rid of all this, right? And this is okay. And this is okay. Okay, so I've got rid of all my PHP markings, all my echoes, right? I've got my loop, which is much better working this way. And now in here, I got to do my echo. So I got to do something like this, PHP with an echo of this, and then close off that PHP statement. That's what I'm going to have to do for each one of these. So PHP. But this makes more sense, right? And it's much more logical and cleaner than the way it was before, where I'm adding all the statements together, right? So like this, right? And now in here, what I want to do is, right after here, I want to do a PHP statement. And I want to inject my ID, right? So I want to do an echo, and I want to close this off. And inside this little area here, right, I want to echo the game ID, right? Just like I have it over there, I want to have it in here too. Make sense? So this game ID is going to be put right in here. That's what I want. So PHP, and then I'm going to send over some ID where my game ID, right? And again, you can see this the way you want, where my game ID, and maybe I'll make a kind of a variable name, where game underscore ID is equal to, and then that. Make sense? That's the proper way of kind of setting it all up, right? If you think about it. Let's see what it actually does. And we'll come back to the delete in a second. Yes? Yeah, that's bad. Thank you for that. You're a man. I think you need to get bonuses. That's it. From now on, when you suggest something, man, you're right on the ball, right? And I'm not. Okay, let's go back to this and refresh and see what happens. Did it break? Hell no. I think I did okay, right? Now, edit when I hover over. Take a look at what I'm getting down here, right? But this is good, right? It says localhost. I'm going to go to gamedetails.php where my game ID is equal to 1. See at the bottom? That's my link. And each one of them should say something different, right? Game ID is equal to 2, 3. This is telling you how I'm going to load everything. I'm going to read everything back in again into my form. I'm going to make a game details form. I'm going to read everything back in. Once I've read everything back in that other form, I'm going to process it, right? I haven't done anything here yet, but I will. So if I click this, it's going to take me to this form. Obviously, this is not found, but it looks like I'm going to go to this game details where my game ID is equal to 1. Questions so far? All right, let's build out this form. Are you guys okay with all this stuff? Boring?
Keep going.
What was that?
Keep going, man.
Am I cutting off? Am I cutting off your head? Am I cutting off your head and pouring stuff in? Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on.
Can you stop me? Come on, guys. I'm going to keep going until you stop
You
us.
gotta go back to the start.
Where did I lose you at hello? Come on. What is this, right?
Hello.
That's an interesting question. Yes, it does. It has a built-in little server, but I could always do it with localhost too. Remember that I've ever since I've started this off, I can always go like this. I can always go localhost, right? And if I press enter, it's going to take me here, right? My WAMP server is still running. That's a good question. So if I click on COMP1006, I added an alias last time, which shows me all my files. So I would go to here, and notice it still shows this. This is on WAMP, my WAMP server. Now if I click this, right, it's going to take me my game details, PHP, game ID is equal to 1. Now, there, of course, it's not found because I don't have a game details page yet, but I will. Okay? Are you with me? All right, so my game details page, I want to pop it up. And what I want to do is I want to read, right, from my URL. That's what I want to do, the details of what I'm getting. And then when I read it in, I'm going to access the database again, right? I already have the connection, but I can access the database.php file. I can include it again, right? Because I don't have to do it more than once. I have it in a separate file, which means I can access the database.php file, make the connection, drag everything back in again, but I only want to search for one ID, which is the ID that I'm going to get in from my URL. So I only want that one. I want to fetch. I don't want to fetch all anymore, right? And once I have that data, I want to have the name, and I'm only searching for a few pieces of data. Later on, we're going to open up that to all the pieces of data. So our table is going to be much wider because remember we made it quite wide, our games. Right now I'm focusing on the data, just small amounts of data from just so we can get this part done. And once we prototype it, we'll be able to do everything else. Are you still lost?
I get what you're saying.
Good. Practice, my friends, is the thing, right? Okay, so that's why I asked you guys to do your lab, you start your assignment tonight. Because if you don't start your assignment tonight, you'll never start, and then it'll be last minute. Everyone will be late, and everyone's going to cry, right?
It's like when the prof asks you for questions, but you don't even know what you don't know. That's me.
Well, the thing to do is, of course, try, and then you'll figure it out, right? All right, so let's go back, and we'll take a short break after this. All right. So, so we got this game details PHP. I'm not sure if that's the right name that I want to use. I think my structure that I've been using right now is all lowercase. So I'm going to kind of change this to lowercase just to stay with my, kind of my best practices, if you will. So game details. Okay, there it is. Let's save that. And inside my project, I want to create a new file. So file, new, right, PHP file, which we're going to call game_details, right? So this is where it's going to go. My game details page is where I'm going to have when I kind of come from my index.php, it's going to go to my details page, and it's going to include my database.php connection at the beginning right away. Okay. So again, it's very similar to this. Here, I got my category ID. This is going to be added into my href. And from here, it's going to transport me with information. I'm going to take this and get information and put me into that other page that I'm going to go to. Right? My other page is actually, if I skip down here, so this is an example of a form. Here's my delete method. And what they've done here is I've created a form inside of my table data. There's another way to do it, right? Where my I go to my delete product page, and my method is post. I'm not really going anywhere. I'm just telling you right now what's happening. I don't have to go there, right? And there's a couple of hidden fields, which I'm not really fond of, right? But what's happening is here is the form itself has a couple of hidden fields, and the form data, that's the form ID, the product ID, the category ID, whatever I want to send, is being sent over, right? And this is being done inside of this for each loop, and it's being done, I'm displaying the data, and when I press delete, I'm actually sending form data to be completed. That's not a bad solution just for my delete button, right? But there's going to be some form data inside of my table data area, basically my little cell. TD is the cell, right? Inside of that cell is going to be a little form. Every time I click that button, that form is going to have a form action. Here's my form action, which is going to take me to my delete page with my method as post. So my delete page actually is not going to go anywhere. It's going to delete everything. And all it's going to have is a little delete. It's going to take me back to my page to refresh my page. It's going to take that data away, right? All right. So that's how this is going to work. We're not going to get that functionality done right now, but I'm going to kind of continue on to talk about this. So it's all in your PowerPoint. All this stuff here from the book. There's the delete product. Notice that there isn't any kind of HTML code here at all. This is just a page to process the data, right? Again, notice that I require once my database at the top of my delete product. We're going to almost do this exactly after the break, right? Here's when I get my product ID and my category ID. Where do I get this from? I'm getting it from my post. I'm using filter input, right? My input, the stuff that's coming into this form. And I'm using the post method to get the product ID and the category ID from my URL and assign the data into these two variables, product ID and category ID. That's what these two lines do. Once I've got that, I can do a query and I can delete from products where my product ID is equal to the product ID that I've connected. That's what this thing does. And we're going to do this. This is the way we're going to do it for my edit as well. Okay, so this is the delete. We're going to get back to that. Here's my add, very similar. Where I add a product, and this is going to be done for my edit. Okay, let's keep going. Here's my add product form. Now my add product form, this is very interesting. My add product form itself, add and edit, right, can be the same form. Just saying, right? Whether you want to add, you want to edit, it's not a big deal. And you can use it as the same form basically to either insert, right, or update. And we're going to look at those functions. But here's a question for you. When I update, right, what I want to do is I want to send over the entire object again in some ways, right? Can I update one field? Certainly, I can update one field. But chances are I'm going to update the entire thing again. It's much easier. And so it's almost like I'm doing an insert, but instead of an insert, I'm doing an update. Okay? And we're going to look at the differences between an insert and an update. So this insert and delete is what's being handled here. Last week, we had a read. We've never seen an update. And that's what the edit is all about. Okay? So let's handle the delete first, and we're going to do that after the break. Let's take 5 minutes. You can guys go have go do a bio break, right? I was going to say something else. Have a quick smoke if you need to smoke. Come back in, right, in 5 minutes, and we'll continue until the end. Please bombard me with questions, because if you don't, it's going to be B230 with a lot of you, right, at the end. And I don't want that. I want you guys to have time. I will record stuff afterwards as well. I know this is going to be a longer session where I need to record more stuff. I'm planning to go to B230 either way to continue with this stuff. There's a lot of stuff I got to talk to you about, and I can't break it into 2 hours. I'm sorry. You don't have to stay for that, but I'm going to record either way, right? Questions around this?
Are you going to put the code we're working on GitHub?
Absolutely. Okay, let's take a short break, and I'll put it up on GitHub, and then you guys should be following along, trying this with me. I know watching is one way, but trying it is far better. All right?